So we've gone over how to create new primitive objects. So we would click somewhere on the stage, do Shift A, and make, for instance, a sphere. Whoops, that's not a sphere. There's a sphere. We've learned how to delete them. So once I make them, I can hit X to delete, or I could right-click on that guy and delete that guy as well. We've learned how to look around a space, how to scale forms, rotate them, and also rotate the scale. Oh, and change position. Right. We got all those things down. So today in this video, we're going to actually start getting into editing individual primitive meshes. So every primitive mesh is a separate object. So this right now is a cube. If I clicked over here and made an icosphere, that is a separate mesh object. And if you clicked in the outliner down, you could see these little vertice points and lines connecting them. And these represent the individual vertices within these objects. So I'm going to delete this sphere. Excuse me. And today we're going to start learning about how to edit the mesh itself. So far we've been working entirely in object mode, which is listed right down here. If you click on object mode, you can see there's a whole bunch of different modes. We're going to get into pretty much all of these this semester. And the next one is edit mode. So go ahead and choose edit mode from this drop down. And you can see that the cube is highlighted. Now I should say also, part of this is that you have to have the cube selected. So if I tried to go into edit mode with the camera, for instance, it won't work. This will only work with mesh objects, primitive mesh objects. So in edit mode, everything is highlighted, and I actually have a couple different types of objects I can edit in here. You have vertices, which are these points, little dots at the corners. You have edges, which are the lines connecting two vertices. And then you have faces, which are the surfaces connecting two or more edges, or sorry, three or more edges. So right now the whole object is selected. Hit A to deselect that object. So A selects everything. Hitting A again deselects everything. Now go ahead and left or right click on one of these vertices. And you can see that you have these transform control tools connected to that individual vertex. So if I hit G to grab it and move it around, I can start to deform that mesh. Look at that. Now I can also grab multiple vertices, so I can hit Shift and then right click and select two vertices. I can move them along certain planes, just like we did with the primitive forms. I can rotate them, and I can scale them. So I hit R for rotate, and now I'm hitting S for scale. So you can change how vertices appear by changing all those parameters, just like you would with the plain mesh objects. So take a few moments, pause the video if you need to go ahead and go around and try grabbing, scaling, and playing around with different vertices. Okay, so once you're done doing that, let's go ahead and think about other forms. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command Z a couple times to undo that, to make this just a normal cube again, more or less. Whoops, we'll get into that in a minute, sorry. So the next thing we can edit are edges. So down here we had the vertices selected. It's very, very tiny. Can you see where my cursor is hovering? Next to that is the edge edit mode, and you can see it looks like those vertices disappear when I select edges. It just means that we can grab single edges to move them around. So if I want to just move this edge down and make it more trapezoidal, I can do that. My cube is rotated, of course, that's why it looks kind of goofy. I can also scale this edge, and I can rotate this edge. So go ahead and pause the video and play around with editing, scaling, rotating, and changing the position of edges. All right, now I'll undo all that again. All right, so last you can edit faces. So if I click on this face tab right there, I can grab an entire face. Now you'll know you're in face editing mode because each face will have a little dot in the middle. This little dot actually becomes really important later on. So just keep in mind that when you can see that dot in the middle of the face, that's a single face. And I can move that whole face up or down. I can rotate it. I can scale it. And all kinds of things. So go ahead and take a few moments to play around with editing faces. All right, so now that we've done all that, let's take a look at some other options within editing those. I'm going to go back to vertex selection mode. You notice that selecting all four, when I have a face selected in face editing mode, and then I go to vertex editing mode, you'll notice all four of those vertices are still selected. So again, I can hit A to deselect everything, and then I can reselect a new vertex just by right-clicking on it. You can also edit multiple modes at once. So if I hold down the Shift key, I can select vertices and edges, or even vertices, edges, and faces. And then depending on what I grab, I can edit multiple forms at once. Whoa, and then get crazy things, which I don't want to do. So just realize that's also an option. I tend to work the most in vertex editing mode. That gives you the most control over forms. And occasionally I'll start getting into edge and face editing. We'll talk a little bit more about when and why you might do one or the other in the next video. The last thing I want to show you are some shortcuts for viewing this. So right now I'm in edit mode. I can toggle back to object mode, but an easy way to edit back and forth is to hit the tab key. So if I hit the tab key on my keyboard with my cursor in the 3D window, it toggles back and forth between object mode and edit mode. So in future videos, you'll see me toggling back and forth between object and edit mode very quickly, and that's because I'm using the tab key. The next thing that's useful is the occlusion mode. So this little button right here, if I click on that, I'll be able to see the shape behind the form, through the form. So notice if I have that turned off, if I want to grab that back corner, I have to rotate the whole object around to grab it. Similarly, if I want to grab that corner, I have to rotate my view around to grab it. But there are going to be times when you're editing an object and you really just want to be able to grab any vertex that you want at any given point in time. So editing in this occlusion mode, which is basically what this guy is, limit selection to visible, can be really helpful when you're trying to edit a complex form and you want to move vertices around, but you don't have to rotate the whole form around. So that's pretty much it for this. Take a couple minutes to play around with this, just goof around, make something really ugly. Try tabbing back out and editing a different kind of primitive form, and try playing around with changing how these shapes look. Make it a little spiky ball. So have fun with that, and then go on to the next page when you're ready.